It began, as so many life-altering moments do, with the kind of silence that feels rehearsed. You know the kind, when people you've known your whole life conspire not with words, but with glances and half-smiles that slice sharper than any knife. That Sunday evening, I walked into my parents' dining room expecting nothing more than the usual liturgy of roasted meat, folded napkins, and critiques about how I should really eat more. But what unfolded beneath the amber light of the chandelier was less a meal than a pre-staged ambush, one that would change the trajectory of my life. I should have recognized the signs earlier. The house itself was already humming with a peculiar tension. Mom polishing crystal glasses long after they were already spotless. Dad hovering by the mahogany table like a general waiting for the bugle call, and the eerie pause before my sister Vanessa swept in with her family in tow. 3 children thundered across the rug, backpacks dropping like anchor weights, and behind them Mark, her husband, shuffled in with the air of someone both present and defeated. Their entrance was disorderly, but the smile on Vanessa's lips was not. It was precise, too precise, as if it had been waiting backstage for its cue. We exchanged the standard pleasantries, though nothing about them felt standard. My parents overcompensated with affection for the kids. My father shot my sister the kind of look that I had seen 1,000 times in childhood. The look that meant a plan has been decided, and you, Gabrielle, are not in on it. I thought I'd grown immune to that look. I thought wrong. The announcement, when it came, was delivered as casually as if she were asking me to pass the salt. "We're moving into your lake house next week," Vanessa declared, eyes sparkling with a false innocence that carried more menace than malice. My fork froze midair. For a heartbeat, the entire room held its breath. Then came the chorus of justifications, Dad noting it was just sitting empty, Mom insisting, "There's plenty of room," the children bickering over which bedroom was theirs as though the walls already bore their names in permanent marker. To them it was settled. To me, it was theft disguised as family obligation. You see, that lake house wasn't just a piece of real estate. It was where I'd clawed my way back to myself after my divorce, where I'd cried into the floorboards as I scrubbed out flood damage with my own hands, where silence had finally become peace instead of loneliness. I'd poured money, sweat, and fragments of a fractured soul into those beams and tiles. And now, with a single flippant proclamation, my family intended to annex it as though it had always been theirs. I remember setting my napkin down with deliberate calm, the way someone might before laying down their cards in a game that everyone else assumed they'd already lost. Their words blurred together. 7 months only. Family needs to help family. You've always been so particular, Gabrielle. What they didn't realize was that I'd been preparing for this without knowing it. In my bag was a folder, thick with renovation permits, contractor agreements, stamped approvals. Proof that while they'd been scheming bedrooms for their children, I'd been plotting a sanctuary for myself. When I placed that folder on the table, the weight of it landed like a gavel. For once, the roles reversed. My sister's practiced smile collapsed, my parents' glasses remained suspended midair. I explained, calmly, that the house was entering a 9-month renovation, down to the studs. It wasn't up for negotiation because the demolition was already scheduled. The silence that followed was the most honest conversation our family had ever had. But of course, silence never holds in my family for long. Vanessa leapt into protest mode, her voice pitched high, accusing me of cruelty, betrayal, even heartlessness toward her children. My father leaned into his negotiator's voice, wielding phrases like, "be reasonable," and "think of the future." My mother dabbed theatrically at her eyes, and then came the threat I had predicted with almost mathematical certainty. Inheritance, my father, the master of veiled consequences, warning that my obstinance might affect certain decisions about the future. What they didn't expect was that I'd grown tired of rehearsing their script. I told them, in words that shook the air, that poor planning on their part did not constitute an emergency on mine. The look on my father's face, that flash of recognition that I was quoting his own business mantra back to him, was the moment I knew I had won something deeper than an argument. I had won myself. I rose from the table, purse in hand, folder tucked like armor beneath my arm, and walked out into the autumn air. Behind me, their protests tangled together into one desperate chorus, but I didn't turn back. Not when my phone buzzed endlessly with their calls, not when Vanessa's texts grew venomous. I drove until the house, the table, the weight of their expectations shrank to a blur in the rearview mirror. And though my hands trembled on the wheel, my resolve was steady as steel. The days that followed unfolded like a chess match in which my family underestimated how many moves ahead I'd already played. Contractors confirmed security systems were in place, locks were changed, cameras installed. Every time I glanced at that manila folder, it no longer looked like paper, it looked like liberation. Yet nothing prepared me for the sight that greeted me the following Monday morning. A moving truck, hulking and stubborn, nosing up the gravel driveway of my lake house like an invading army. The engine idled like some great beast, its exhaust curling into the crisp morning air. I stood at my kitchen window, coffee cooling in my hand, watching as the burgundy-lettered truck blocked the narrow lane leading to my property. My phone buzzed with another call from my father, his sixth before sunrise, but I let it vibrate against the counter, mute and insistent like a trapped insect. By the time I drove up to the house, Ray and his crew had already established their perimeter. Bright orange cones and wooden sawhorses cut the driveway off like a makeshift fortress. The men in hard hats moved with the precision of soldiers. Even the chainsaws, stacked idle for the moment, hummed with the promise of demolition. And there it was, Vanessa, perched atop the cab of the moving truck like a general surveying her conquest, sunglasses gleaming despite the overcast sky. "What is this circus?" she demanded the moment she spotted me, striding across the gravel as though she still held title to everything within her gaze. "Your goons won't let the movers through." I lifted the folder from under my arm, the same folder I'd slapped down on my parents' table a week earlier. "Because the property is entering renovation today." As I explained repeatedly, she laughed, sharp and brittle. "We already gave notice. We're moving in. You can't seriously expect us to find housing overnight." I withdrew an envelope from my bag and held it out. "6 months of storage prepaid. Your furniture will be safe." The way she stared at the envelope, you would think I had handed her a death sentence. She didn't take it. "Storage?" Her voice cracked like ice. "We need somewhere to live, Gabrielle, not a locker for our things." For a heartbeat, the silence between us filled with all the ghosts of our shared childhood. The way she used to slip into my room and take whatever she fancied. The way our parents excused it as sibling dynamics, brushing off my protests with that tired refrain. "She's younger, she needs more, you'll understand one day." But that day had never come. And standing there now, watching her jam an old key into a lock that no longer turned, I realized it never would. A metallic voice issued from the speaker by the door. "Unauthorized entry attempt detected." Alerting property owner and security service. My phone chimed with confirmation. Vanessa spun toward me, eyes wide. "You changed the locks?" "Last week," I said simply, nodding toward the new cameras nestled along the eaves. "Standard security protocol." Her face broke, not into tears but into something rawer, entitlement stripped of its polish, the bare neediness beneath. "You can't do this to us. We're family. Family respects boundaries," I replied, steady enough that even I marveled at the calm in my own voice. That was when the truck roared to life again, swerving onto the lawn to bypass the barricades. Tires shredded the ornamental grasses I had planted in spring, and the movers began unloading furniture in defiance. An ornate dresser hit the ground with a dull thud, sending a tremor through me, not of fear, but of resolve. I didn't shout, I didn't rage. I simply dialed a number I had prepared in advance. "Yes, Lakeside Auction House. This is Gabrielle Morgan. Please proceed with pickup as arranged. Donate proceeds to the Foster Youth Program." Vanessa froze mid-gesture, disbelief cracking across her face. "Auction house? What are you?" I ended the call with deliberate calm. I anticipated this. The day unfolded in a blur of demolition and fury. Sawdust filled the air as hammers crashed through drywall, while Vanessa alternated between threats and sobs on the lawn. Mark hovered in the background, a reluctant soldier following orders, his eyes darting between me and the growing pile of displaced furniture. When he finally coaxed her back into the truck, promising to fix this tomorrow, I felt less like a victor and more like someone who had finally stopped playing a rigged game. 2 days later, the phone call came, venomous enough to sear through the speaker. "You heartless bitch," Vanessa shrieked. "They took everything. That was grandmother's furniture?" I stepped into the gutted master bedroom, studs exposed, sunlight streaming where walls once stood. "Then it should never have been dumped on property you don't own." Her silence afterward was louder than her rage. By then, I had amassed more than just paperwork. I had photographs, security footage, police reports. For every move she made, I had already documented the counter. And when she threatened that our parents were coming to talk sense into me, I didn't flinch. I welcomed it. Let them come. Let them see exactly what I had built. what I was no longer willing to surrender. When their car finally crunched over the gravel, the demolition of the master suite had just concluded. I stood framed by sunlight streaming through exposed beams, hard hat on, goggles perched like armor. Behind me, the house echoed with the sounds of rebirth. Dad's voice carried across the yard, stern and bewildered. "What have you done?" "Exactly what I told you," I answered. 9-month renovation, everything down to the studs. Inside, they faltered. The living room was stripped bare, the fireplace reduced to skeletal brick, the floor a patchwork of subfloor and dust. My mother clutched at her pearls. "You've destroyed it," she whispered. "No," I corrected. "I'm rebuilding it, my vision, my timeline." And as I spread the blueprints across a makeshift table, explaining vaulted ceilings, lake-facing windows, and children's nooks designed not for nieces and nephews but for foster youth who had never known a stable home, I saw it, the tiniest fracture in my father's iron facade. Admiration, unwilling but undeniable. He recognized good planning when he saw it, even if it came from the daughter he had long underestimated. For once, I was not the family's afterthought. I was the architect of my own story. 3 months into the renovation, I found myself once again at my parents' table. The burgundy napkins, the polished crystal, the pot roast, it was all there, a tableau of tradition arranged like bait. Only this time, I walked in knowing exactly what game they were playing. I spotted the extra place setting before I even sat down. Reinforcements were coming. Sure enough, Pastor Williams arrived with the solemnity of a man summoned to referee a family crisis. My parents leaned on him like a jury they'd stacked in advance. My father spoke of community expectations, my mother of family harmony, all while I quietly scrolled through photos on my tablet. I slid it across the table. Images of the house gutted to the studs, scaffolding hugging its frame, the storm damage I had faced alone years earlier while they vacationed in the Caribbean. The silence that followed was almost holy. My mother's fork clinked against her plate, my father's jaw tightened, and Pastor Williams murmured, "My goodness, what a transformation." For once, truth weighed heavier than manipulation. It was in that silence that my mother whispered something I'd never heard from her before. I should have helped with those repairs. Simple, naked, no excuses, and it shook me more than all the shouting had, but the moment didn't last. The front door burst open, and in swept Vanessa, cheeks flushed with indignation. She expected a united front. What she found instead was her sister calmly distributing invitations to a housewarming scheduled for 6 months hence. "You're all welcome," I said, voice steady, as guests with advance notice. I left them staring after me, the cards finally in my hands. 6 months later, the lake house was unrecognizable. The vaulted ceilings arched like open arms, the oak beams warm with reclaimed strength, the private office overlooking the water bathed in morning light. I brewed coffee in a kitchen gleaming with copper accents, laughter from friends still echoing from the night before. No children's homework sprawled across the dining table, no sister's demands crowding the air. Just me. When my parents finally came to see it, they entered timidly, carrying a small jade plant like a peace offering. My father's eyes widened at the craftsmanship. My mother whispered, "Remarkable," twice before she realized she'd repeated herself. They toured the rooms like visitors in a museum, each step an admission that the house was mine, not theirs to commandeer. Later, as guests drifted in and out, contractors with champagne, auction house staff sharing photos of the community center, now furnished with what Vanessa had abandoned. Even the security company dropping off a gift basket. My phone buzzed. A message from my sister, "I'm sorry about the furniture. Can we talk?" I stared at the screen for a long time before replying, "Dinner next month. Bring dessert, no discussion about moving in. Boundaries firm but not cruel. A door left ajar but not wide open." That evening, as twilight settled over the lake, I walked to the dock alone. The water mirrored the fading sky, gold melting into violet. My reflection, solid and unwavering, stared back at me. For years, I had believed peace meant yielding, sacrificing pieces of myself until only fragments remained. But now, standing in the sanctuary I had rebuilt beam by beam, I understood. Peace was not surrender. Peace was the courage to defend your boundaries, even from those who claimed to love you most. And as the last light slipped beneath the horizon, I realized something even deeper. That sometimes, the truest form of family is the one you build within yourself.